Would you please take the roll call for me?
Yes, I will. Commissioner Hannan,
I am here.
Commissioner Berlandi,
Here.
Commissioner Fox,
Here.
Commissioner Eisner, Commissioner Kelsey,
Present.
Commissioner Simpson,
Here.
Commissioner Stachin, Commissioner Brick, and Commissioner Canto.
Okay, so
All right, sir.
we're a little light on folks, but we do still have a quorum.
No, we do, and I did just for the record, everyone that is absent did actually contact me and know that they wouldn't be able to attend.
Yeah, and I got the emails as well, so thank you.
No problem.
So first item on we'll call the meeting to order for March 1st, 2023. New business, Bulwark LLC. The lots 8120 and 8122 Colt Highway. Attorney Pearson, you want to start us off?
Yes, good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. I am Attorney Pearson. I have a firm in Glastonbury. Firm is Alter and Pearson, and I'm here this evening with the other part of the team, which encompasses Dave Ziyax from F.A. Hesketh and Associates, and Anthony Tony Zemba from Landtech, our environmental wetlands consultant. And I think it's fair to say that you've become quite familiar with what's proposed now with all the development to be on the east side of the site. At our last session, you suggested that it would make a big difference to the commission if we were to put the western side of the site into a conservation easement. You had postponed a decision on whether or not this was the activity to be deemed a significant activity. And I believe it's fair to say that you thought that if the entire west side was also encumbered by the conservation easement, which would preclude future development except for the potential construction of a septic field to serve the east side of the site, that would go a long way in terms of how you would view the significance of the activity on the east side. So you have a transmittal from Dave Ziyax, and he can go into it in a little more detail. But the applicant has agreed to encumber the west side with the conservation easement, and we only want to make sure that the record reflects that we would want to have a provision in that easement that would allow for the construction and maintenance of a septic connection leaching field, should that be required on that portion of the site to serve the east side. And so with that, we really don't have anything new to offer, but I would like Dave just to go through the plan that shows the conservation easement. And of course, we're here to answer any questions that you may have. Dave, you're muted.
No, he's not. Yeah, maybe having a problem with his microphone. Yeah.
I don't see him as muted, so.
Yeah, he's showing up there, so he's having a problem.
All right. Dave, do you want me to just go through the easement plan you submitted? Keep working at it, because I don't want to miss anything that you feel is relevant to put before the commission. But do you have, Bruce, that sketch that we submitted? There you go.
Yep.
Okay. So in red is the proposed area of the conservation easement, and it extends all the way through the west side covers the entire area that you had requested we include in a conservation easement. We have had an opportunity to talk briefly with Bruce about this, and I don't believe there are any outstanding issues that Bruce has from a technical standpoint with this proposal. Am I correct, Bruce, on that?
That is correct.
So, may I request again that the application be found to be non-significant, that you render a favorable decision on this evening, if possible, and that the only caveat with regard to that conservation easement be that it would be drafted to include the ability to construct that connection and the septic leaching field and maintain it as might be required by the development on the east side.
Okay, thank you. And actually, unlike normal tradition where I usually go through the other commission members, I'm actually gonna go first tonight, I think. Thank you for the consultation with the client in dealing with the conservation easement. I can say from my perspective, the overall development of the site, my anxiety has dropped significantly. I think with the conservation easement, I would be leaning towards saying this is not a significant activity, nor is it a significant project. Therefore, I mean, from my perspective, I don't think it would be subject to a public hearing. And again, a lot of this has to do with, well, actually all of it has to do with going in with the conservation easement on the western side of the property. I agree with you wholeheartedly that you really do need to keep that potential area for the septic system available. And actually, one of the things I was thinking about is even if you find that there's a spot on the eastern side of the property, you may still need to maintain that area on the western side for septic, because Lord knows, unfortunately, septic systems do fail. So if you know that you've got some pretty good soils in that area, again, that would be tied in, I think, with the conservation easement to make sure that you're still able to go ahead and do routine maintenance and things of that nature at that site. But that's kind of where I'm at. But Bruce, I do have a question for you. Have planning and engineering comments all been addressed from the town's perspective on this?
No, they haven't, but they all can be made a condition of approval, though.
Okay, that's just kind of where I'm going. Again, my take is I'm ready to vote on this tonight. So that's my 2 cents for the night. So Rich, I'll go to you next.
I'm kind of feeling the same way you are, Bob. I don't have any further questions, and feel ready to vote tonight.
Okay, thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I agree that the easement really eases my mind of looking at the site as a whole. It looks much better to have significant preservation of not only the wetlands, but the adjacent uplands. I think it would be good to have for the record what the total acreage of the easement is, as well as the percent of the site that is involved in the easement, because I think that's a key factor in a vote to approve this, and that should be on the record. Maybe Mr. Ziyax has that information, but it's silent at the moment. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks. Neil?
Yeah, I agree with yourself, Bob, and the other commissioners. I believe I'm ready to vote on this tonight, and I do appreciate the efforts reaching back out to the client and in granting the conservation easement as shown in this exhibit.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Mark?
I also feel appreciative that all the parties were able to work together to come up with a solution to making this project successful. And I am ready to vote on this tonight also. That's all.
Okay, so the first thing I want to see if I can get a motion for is that this is not a significant activity, nor is it a significant project. Therefore, it would not be subject to a public hearing.
So moved by Mark.
Is there a second?
Dave will second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor where we would find this project as it is now before us, that it is not a significant activity, nor is it a significant project. Therefore, it's not warranted to have a public hearing. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, one hurdle down.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
little difficult with our lead engineer being mute, but I'm going to look at him and just ask whether there's anything else we were supposed to mention before the commission actually votes on this. And he's going to have to either shake his head one way or the other, or write on a piece of paper. Yeah.
technology is a wonderful thing when it works.
I know.
Could he respond in the chat?
Yeah. No, well, technically, no, not because it's a response. I mean, if Dave is all set, if he wants to put a thumbs up or
Thumbs up. Okay, we're
like
good.
he's good. How does that work in court?
We all saw the thumb up, so I'm fine with this. I'm ready to move on. Thank you very much.
All right.
Okay,
The only thing I had, Chair, was I had put together, and it kind of was afterthought, and I had bounced these off of Attorney Pearson and Mr. Zayeks, but I had pulled some conditions of approval that we had drafted up earlier, and those were not part of the actual agenda review. But these were mostly these are just more or less points that we want to emphasize in the plan set and in the approval. So none of these are anything that was extra or out of the ordinary. It's dealing with the engineering comments, final stamped plans, coordinating with the Connecticut DEP on the NDDB comment that they had regarding a biological survey.
Bruce,
yeah.
You suggested you were going to change that, provide
I
a
did.
letter of concurrence.
Oh, geez, it's not approval. It's in the one. It's in my folder when I transferred it over. I forgot to transfer, but it doesn't say it's approval. It's
Concurrence, a letter.
concurrence. Thank you. I was trying to think of the word. Yes. Meets and bounds, just like we had talked about for the easement. We don't have anything set in stone yet, so the meets and bounds will be added to the conservation easement.
yeah, and Bruce, based upon, I think what Dave was talking about earlier, can we also incorporate in that the area
Yes.
that's associated with the conservation easement?
Yeah, we'll do. That's usually a typical, once a map is developed with the meets and bounds, they actually put the area in there as well. And what I'll do is I'll have them change the table just to show a percentage of the property.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Conservation easement medallions are to be installed along the easement lines prior to the first CO. The term construction activities will include removal of trees to access the site. Pre-construction meeting will take place with town staff. Prior to removal of vegetation, the wetland boundary and easements will be clearly delineated and clearing limits will be staked. Prior to clearing, orange construction fence will be installed along the proposed clearing limits near the wetlands or is approved by the town staff. Clearing of fallen trees and other debris on the subject property within the wetlands. That's the area on the north side at the toe of the slope that we had walked in the earlier application. Cleaning those up because there's some trees across the swale that will cause it a dam. No mass earthwork shall begin until the erosion controls in. All sediment erosion controls measures shall be implemented in accordance with the approved plans. The applicant and contractor shall notify the planning division once all erosion control measures are in place and prior to start. And erosion sedimentation control shall be monitored regularly by the project soil scientist, project engineer. So it goes through every week, half-inch of rain or so, and that's actually in the plan set, but just want to have that again as a condition of approval, so it's clear. Invasive species removal, we'll look at that and see if anything needs to be cleaned out. Once that's done, a report will be provided to the town of planning division by December 30th, 1st of each year. Wetland and scientists shall inspect the proposed buffer plantings at the base of the retaining wall once those are installed and provide an inspection report on that as well. And long-term maintenance plan would be approved by staff to address a regular cleaning of the property of any trash or debris that may fall along the base of the retaining walls or adjacent to the wetlands. Conduct maintenance of the stormwater system in accordance with the long-term system and overall site maintenance plan, and then to provide yearly reports to our office by the January 31st of each year. Rental agreements shall prohibit the storage of vehicles, oil hazardous, or other regulated materials. All site de-icing materials, chemicals shall be stored inside the building. So I think those were all that we had addressed over the whole time of this application. So, and then I had in the agenda review expansion of the conservation easement. That was done, and that was depicted on this revised plan.
Yeah, this is pretty much boilerplate, I think, of what we use
exactly
for all sites. So, I mean, Attorney Pearson, do you have any issues with anything that was stated here other than that one word?
No, we do not. And we had a chance to look at those quickly before the meeting.
Okay.
Thank you.
So with that being the case, and based upon what I've heard from folks, would somebody care to make a motion to approve the application subject to these conditions? And I think the one clarification on that is I think it would be based on the proposed conservation easement that was submitted to us for the March 1st, 2023 meeting.
Yep, that's number 4.
Okay, so that's there. Okay, nope, that's perfect.
Yep. Perfect.
So, would somebody care to make a motion to that effect, including these conditions?
This is Rich. I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Mark, second.
Okay, so we have a motion to approve the application based on all the final changes and the conservation easement dated March 1st, 2023. We have pretty much the list of conditions that the applicant has agreed to. So all those in favor?
Bob,
Yes.
before we
Yep.
vote, do we need a condition on the on what happens if the septic system has to be on the western part of the property?
No,
Yeah,
because I
something to the
think
effect that they need to
what
work
they're
with the
talking
town.
about is, I think the way the conservation easement needs to be written is they need to be able to reserve the right to be able to put the septic system on the western part of the property. That to me is really not that big of a deal. I know the preference is to try to find a site on the western portion. I'm sorry, on the eastern portion, but if they can't, it would go on the west. So I think that's going to be something that would have to be incorporated into the conservation easement itself, allowing them the ability to go ahead and do that.
Okay, and I assume, is that where there would be some language to the effect that they would have to work with the town, you know, on the construction and the disruption of the wetlands and things like that? Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to approve the applications with the conditions identified. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Abstaining? Good luck with the project.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.
Have a good night. Okay, let me get the next application up.
Yeah, the next application, our friends at 402 Farmington Avenue.
All right. This A little slow. All right, I think Tom. I think Tom Daly and Ben Tripp are here for the presentation.
That's
There you go,
correct.
Tom. There you
That's
go.
correct. Can you hear me? Great. Nice to see
can.
everybody. For the record, Tom Daly with SLR Consulting. Also with me this evening is Ben Tripp with Metro Realty. So we're here before you to come back with the 402 project for a site plan amendment for additional activities. And these activities are primarily, or really just focused on the utilities and the access roads. So Bruce, if you can take the next utility plan, that would be great. So to this commission, as you recall, we have an access drive that comes off of Farmington Ave and access through the site. The road currently exists today. It's actually been a road that's been serving the Public Works property that is located basically just south of us. And that's the road is out there today. And that road was actually installed also part of an old application, I think, associated with a church. And we were going to continue to use that road. During the design process, we had planned on a few things. First of all, when the church was built and the road was built, they actually did put a water main in. And the as-built plans, actually town helped us get some as-built plans. They show a water main in it. We expected to use that water main to serve our project. After we left you and we got our planning and zoning approval, we started to have a conversation with the MDC, only to find out that, in fact, while that water main was installed, it was never inspected by the MDC. They never saw it went in, and they would make no representation as to its viability. I mean, the reality is it may be perfectly great, but as you can believe, public water is important and quality, but they had no record of it. They were never notified of it. So unfortunately, we are going to have to dig up the water main and replace it. And we are going to have to put that water main in the road, virtually in the same location as today. The water company has changed, MDC's changed its rule a little bit. We're actually going to be or not potentially, but we're looking to run a parallel fire and domestic with a meter pit being put out by Farmington Ave where Bruce is pointing, but it's going in the same trench. So essentially we're ripping out a water main and just putting back two water mains in the same trench. It will be and it'll go in the same location. The second utility that we're coming before you is, our expectation at that time was we were expecting to go overhead power lines, at least till we got across the gas main and into the site, at which point we were going to drop down and go underground. After review with the utility companies and getting into that, it was determined that overground approach was not going to be acceptable. And then we were going to have to put those utilities underground. The electrical, telephone, communication line, that'll be in a single duct bank. And then generally it'll be located on, I guess, if you're looking at this plan, on the right side of the road, underneath the sidewalk. So for the commission to understand, we're working in the same footprint of the driveway that's existing today. We're just doing utility work, and that's resulting in excavation, which results in us coming back to this commission. So yeah, Bruce, if you pan up a little bit more. So if you remember, Quarry Road comes up, there's a pinch point where the wetlands are to there, and you can see the two wetlands there. And those two wetlands result in upland review area that borders on both of those areas. Essentially, we're talking about 490 linear feet of pipe trench on both scenarios. And Bruce, if you can kind of zoom right into that kind of critical area, I will just show the commission where these two utilities are located. And if you see the ETC line, that's our electrical line. So the electrical is probably going to be about a 36 inch trench, and it's about 30 inches deep. All three utilities, typically they're 3 or 4 inch conduits. We just lay those right in and off they go. Directly to the left of that, virtually down the center line of the road, you can see a DW and an FP, and that's essentially a fire protection line and a domestic, fire protection and a domestic water line. Those will be about 4.5 feet down, 4.5 feet wide, and they'll probably be a bucket's width of excavation. It's unfortunate that we have to go back and replace it, but them's the breaks, I guess. So all work will be done very sequentially. They'll be done at separate times. The way the water main usually gets put in is you'll dig the trench. You'll put a stick of pipe in, say a 12 to 18 foot piece of pipe, and then you're going to backfill as you go. So there's never going to be a situation where there's a long trench open. We'll be backfilling, and you essentially finish the work that you complete in a day. So there will not be a large area of exposed ground, and we're going to be backfilling as we go. We think that the electrical will be done in the same way. The electrical is a little quicker because it's a shallower trench, but same thing. We simply just trench, backfill as we go, and then it's a very nice and tidy, operation. We're also committed to anytime we see any heavy rainfall event predicted, that's not going to be a day we're going to work on it. So with that, you also have a letter in your file from Megan Raymond, who was the wetland scientist on the project. We asked her to go back and take a look at the activities we were proposing here. And she went step by step, and her letter is actually very, very detailed in terms of the information on that I just gave you. But she has concluded that based upon the small footprint of activity, based upon the fact that this activity is already in an existing road bed and in an area that this commission has already reviewed, and the fact that it's going to be cleaned up and very sequentially construction, not a lot of work, that this area can be easily protected with your standard silt fence along the perimeter. And it's her professional opinion that, in fact, it will have no negative impact on the wetlands. So with that, I'd be more than happy to answer any questions. And as I said, Ben Tripp is with me, and he can talk if any operational questions come up also. Thank you.
So is Megan going to say anything, or was she just here?
I'm sorry, Megan. I'm sorry, Megan wasn't able. Megan actually had a conflict with another hearing.
Okay.
So I'm doing double duty. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
Okay.
But her letter is in the record, and I forgot that it's dated. She submitted a letter on record, and it's dated February 17th.
Right here. Yeah. And that was also included in the file to everyone as well.
Mm-hmm. You know, I just didn't know if we were waiting for her to make a.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah,
that's all.
She has a hearing in Wallingford this evening.
Okay. Rich, I guess I'll start with you. Any questions, comments?
No, this looks pretty straightforward. I don't have any questions or comments.
Okay, thanks. Dave?
Sorry, I was muted. No, I think I'm all set. I thought I had read in one of the letters that actually the fence and the wattles are already in place, so that there doesn't need to be any changes to that because of this amendment.
No, the only thing I had asked for in the agenda review, I think, was down in here. It's not a wetland related thing, but it is a erosion control down here, to just put some erosion control down here to protect anything from washing out to Quarry Road and then Farmington Avenue.
And we, before we start, we'll take an inspection of all our activities. But if anybody's had a chance to drive in there, the site is very tidy and all the erosion controls are already in place.
Yeah, everything's in on this side, pretty much.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. Neil?
Yeah, I don't have any concerns. This looks pretty straightforward.
Okay. Mark?
No concerns, no questions. Thank you.
Well, I do have a question for you. Bruce, can you blow up the area? I think it's a little bit north of that Because
Here?
no, it's further up the road. My question is really related to where the 3 existing pipes are, which actually help cause the vernal pool. So how is that area going to be dug out? Like, what are we talking about as far as the depth of the trenches? What's the
So-
depth or elevation of the 3 pipes that are in that area? And how are you going to work around that?
Sure. So if you look here, the invert of the pipe is at 354, and the top of road is 362. So there's a pretty decent height difference there. And I recall these being these 30-inch pipes, I recall. Yeah. So the good thing is the water main is already in, so it's both utilities will go over the existing pipes.
Okay.
There's enough elevation there. Clearly the electrical, because we're only gonna be 30 inches deep there. So luckily we do not have to impact those pipes. Those pipes will remain as is, and we'll be going over those.
Okay, I just wanted to get a clarification
Yeah.
on that because I know we spent a lot of time talking about those pipes
Yep.
and the vernal pool. So I just wanted that on the record.
Yeah, there'll be no modifications to the inverts or the as those pipes currently exist.
Okay, no, that was my question. So I guess the first thing we need to do is get a motion to accept the application.
Dave will make that motion.
Is there a second?
Mark, second.
We have a motion to accept the application. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstaining. Okay, so I guess we can act on this at the next meeting. Right, because I don't think we can act on it tonight, correct, Bruce?
No, nope. I've got the in the agenda review. That's correct. You'll have to wait till next meeting.
Well,
The 15th.
We appreciate your time, and thank you very much.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know if we need to do this technically, but we probably do. I would say this is a non-significant activity. So does somebody want to make a motion to that effect?
I would make a motion that's non-significant.
Is there a second?
Dave will second.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to say that this is a non-significant activity. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, so at least this way we don't have the public hearing for you.
Oh, thank you, and I appreciate you taking care of that.
Okay, so I think that's it for this one tonight, right, Bruce?
Yep.
That's it.
All right,
Thank you, everybody. See you next meeting. Bye.
okay, take care.
Next item on the agenda is 9 Apple Tree. I did receive a plan about a couple hours ago, so I have not had a chance to really dive into it. So I'm putting it up on the screen for you guys right now. Oh, I already have that one. And the George Logan and the owner are on so they could actually present this and bring this in. George, are you there?
Yes, of course. I'm right here. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. George Logan for the record, Rema Ecological Services. I figure the first thing that I would do is I'll give you the most recent photographs if you'd like, and sort of do a 20,000 foot overview of the plan, and then I'm sure there's going to be questions since this just arrived this afternoon. Can you zoom in and the first one? So as you recall, part of the clearing that was done, or the most of the clearing that was done actually was done on the neighboring property, which is 11 Apple Tree Lane. And so what I wanted to do in these photographs to kind of show you where things begin and end. So this is the middle section of the swale on 9 Apple Tree, and you see flag number 4 here that I've indicated. You can see there's some hay bales that are within the swale. I understand, and Mr. Rodriguez will be able to explain that better, that there was a storm event, and so the water backed up, I think, and so there had to be some emergency corrections, I guess. But anyhow, this is the part of the swale that's on the property. And this swale, as you know, the water's coming towards us. It's coming off of a wetland that's on also neighboring property, which is, I believe, 1200 New Britain Avenue, over there where the trees are. The next photograph, if you scroll up a little bit, Bruce, is we're kind of coming up a little further up the swale. And what that arrow is indicating is the last flag on 9 Apple Tree Lane. The remaining of the swale and the wetlands that were delineated by Mr. Jackson, Bill Jackson, last year, I guess he didn't realize that he was delineating on the adjacent property. Maybe that was part of the issue also. That was not an indication exactly of where the property boundary was. Now we know exactly what the property boundary is. Anyway, so from here on, the swale is within the next property over. So let's go to the next picture. I am on 11 Apple Tree Lane. I'm looking back towards the cul-de-sac, and you can see I'm indicating, you can't really see a lot of the stakes, but that stake you see there is number 10 on the map, and I'll point those out to you a little later. So according to Mr. Jackson, this was the edge of the wetland. Now, I tried to determine exactly where the wetland was based on what's out there now. It was a little more difficult than I thought it was going to be because of the disturbance. So we're just going by Mr. Jackson's delineation as being sufficiently accurate. So that's number 10. And you can see there has been some hay that's been put down in places close to the swale, not everywhere, but there's a couple of sections down low towards the cul-de-sac that I told Mr. Rodriguez to put some more hay down. If you go to number 4, now I'm again 11 Apple Tree Lane, and you can see these 3 last stakes of the 3 last flags that Mr. Jackson put in. And by the way, these were surveyed, back surveyed by the survey that produced the map. So what you see here that's new, by the way, the one that's on the far is on 1200 New Britain Avenue, is past the wall. You can see that little white stick that's sticking up. That's flag number 15. 14 is within a wetland, and that was probably one of the most obvious areas of wetland that I was able to find. And then what you see, maybe, this is not 3D obviously, where the hay bale is, and if you go straight out to the corner of the property, there is a ditch that was created to account for some water that was coming into the property in that corner. So that was dug, if you will, in an upland area. So if we go to the next flag, to the next picture. Now, what I've done with the next 4 series of pictures is I'm standing on a stake, which is actually a corner property. And what I'm going to do in the next couple of 4 pictures is I'm going to keep zooming in so you can actually see the line of the property boundary between 9 and 11. So there's the first one. There's the second one. So then pointing to a stake that you'll see in the next picture a little more clearly. Again, these were put by the surveyor. There's the one in the middle that you just saw in the previous picture. Then there's one that's basically in the swale, and to the left of it is that last flag that I talked about, A7. And then in the final picture, you see that the far stake, again, how these things line up, and that is the corner stake there where 3 properties meet. So Bruce, if you can go to the map. So what I've done here is I've taken and scanned in, and it's not necessarily to scale. We could figure out a scale easily, but I just wanted a graphical representation of what's there. I took the map, I think it was a July date on that map, and it was originally the last one that was submitted to the commission when there was the proceedings going on. And then what I've tried to do is to show 4 areas, and then you can see there that I have some restoration, wetland and upland restoration sequence, and we can go through that in a moment. Area A, as you can see, what I've done is I've mapped on the right side of that lighter green area. I've mapped the wetland boundary. Obviously, that was not done. We only did one side, or Bill Jackson did one side, but it's quite obvious where the swale is and where the boundary of the regulated boundary ends. So I did that based on the photographs that I had collected and looking at the map. And so you see this second area, this area A is an area which there has been some fill placed in wetlands. So that's the area where we'll have to remove some soil to restore the wetlands. And then of course that area would have to be planted. The area that's in the more olive green is the upland area. Again, we have seeding and planting there, and you'll see that in a moment. And then the light green is what I'm calling area C, not that one, Bruce, but the light green within the swale itself. Obviously, that is also in need of some care and stabilization. So we have a separate plan for that. And finally, what Mr. Rodriguez indicated when I was in the field with him on Monday, when we were able finally to get together, we've had conflicting schedules for several days, is he would like to have a privacy screen and use a staggered row of arborvitaes to do that. So that's where that, it more or less begins there. So as you can see, most of the restoration effort will happen on 11 Apple Tree. And my understanding is that there's some negotiations that are happening between Mr. Rodriguez and Ms. Chomsky, Patricia Chomsky, to do a swap, because her front yard is actually not on her lot, is on Mr. Rodriguez's lot. So they're negotiating about doing a swap, but still there's need for restorative activities back there. All right, so if you can focus on just the little sequence that I have there, Bruce, and you can kind of go through it quickly. Again, this is not particularly detailed, but I think it basically covers those areas that we just talked about. So area A, where the removal of soil is going to happen, we would have to install a silt fence or hay bale barrier at the edge of the existing swale, because we're obviously going to be disturbing the soil. So we don't want to compound the problem by having that go into the swale if a big rainstorm comes in. And so the soil will be removed from area A. There will be some grading that would happen. And as I've explained to Mr. Rodriguez, the actual grading will go beyond the wetland boundary by probably in the order of 8 or so feet, because we don't want to have a drop of a foot. That's, we want to have at least a 3-to-1 slope, if not a 4-to-1 slope. So you can imagine that the grading is going to go beyond into sort of the southwest of the wetland boundary. So from wetland boundary marker A9 all the way to 14. I envision that that the final grade would be about 8 to 10 inches above. It would be fairly gentle or almost flat. 8 to 10 inches above the bottom of the swale, so that the water is still conveyed through the swale and not doesn't overtop that area, unless you have a big storm, which could obviously happen. Under number 3 there, I have that there's some tables that we will look at that have 1 through 4 that have all the materials that we're proposing. Then area B, we're, except for that little grading that's going to happen into it, so we have the nice gradual slope, will just be amended with 4 inches of topsoil. And I missed to say that we're going to make sure that we have at least 6 inches of good topsoil within the wetland restoration area. So that area B, upland, will have 4 inches of topsoil, and then of course we're going to have some planting there too. Area C is a little bit of an issue because as I looked at the photographs that Mr. Jackson provided, the swale was grassy for the most part. It had some wetland plants, not a lot. And by the way, the soils within that swale are not wetland soils, so, but it conveys water, so it is a regulated area because it's also connected. There's a nexus to it. So yeah, sorry about that.
No,
So
there you go.
Yep. So what we're going to have to do here, and this is something that we're going to have to probably discuss. The problem is to be able to stabilize the swale to its previous condition so that it's grassy, so it withstands flows and doesn't erode any longer. There's a few sections in there that have steeper slopes than were in pre-existing conditions. Part of me is saying, well, we could lay those down a little bit. Certainly, we will in that area A. But we don't have a lot of, the idea is if we do too much disturbance, then, and that takes a longer time, then you're kind of asking for trouble, a risk if a storm comes. So the idea would be to use some jute netting or some erosion control, the light ones, the biodegradable blankets in some of those areas. And there's probably, I'd say about 30 to 35% of the slope is in need of that. And so basically what you do is you scarify it, you put the seed down, you put the blanket on and tack it down really good. And the tacking is going to go right into the bottom of the swale. Because I think that's the only way that we're going to be able to allow for the vegetation to grow and have a good root mass established to withstand flows, or else we're going to be visiting this area again and again. So I think that's going to have to be a necessary exercise for us to use some of that erosion control mesh. And then I did specify seed mixes for that, and we'll see those in a minute. The privacy screen, again, we talked about that. That's we recommend. We're proposing the Thuja occidentalis, a deer-resistant arborvitae. You're probably all familiar with those. And 9, which is very important because we need to be sure that it's done according to plan, that this effort would have to be supervised by a wetlands professional. And then there has to be monitoring the first year post-implementation, probably a couple of times at least. And then an additional 2 full growing seasons monitoring. So year 2, year 3, which is pretty typical. And then one thing that I did not, I almost forgot about is that we're going to be some mechanical removal of invasive plants if they come in. My understanding from talking to Mr. Jackson is that there were some invasives in that area that was cleared. Multiflora rose was one of them. And you can see that in the adjacent properties, also Morris honeysuckle. So that's that. Now, if we can go to the tables, we have 4 tables. Table 1, yes, I'm proposing 6 trees. Some will go into the upland area and some will go into that little wetland, the restoration area, probably closer to the wetland boundary. And you can see red maple, sugar maple, pinoak, and black gum. We have some larger shrubs or small trees for the upland area, witch hazel, which I saw next door, so I figured, hey, that's good. Then for your medium shrubs, if you will, as you go down, we have 14 of those. Again, this is not a humongous area. I think if we take area A and B and put them together, we have about 3,000 square feet of area. And of course, then we also have the soil and the privacy screen. So you can see there are all these native species. My guess is, from talking to Mr. Jackson, is if we do this and it takes well, we're actually diversifying the habitat. I'm sure that diversity wasn't there before. The other thing, if you go to table 3, I'm also proposing some plugs in some areas, and most of these will go. And I know it looks like a lot of them, but obviously these are plugs. You can plant those usually 1 foot on center, 2 feet on center, and those are actually species. A couple of these species I saw next door, French sedge and stoutwood ryegrass. When I guess I was trespassing on 1200, unbeknownst to me. And then finally, the table number 4 gives you the 2 seed mixes. Yep, here we go. Seed mix 1 is for the upland restoration area, and that's the New England Conservation Wildlife seed mix. It does have some facultative wetland species in there, so from moist areas. And then seed mix 2 is what we call the erosion control restoration seed mix. There's a lot of grass component to that, which is what we need. And then, as you can see in yellow, very important, we're supplementing 15% by weight with annual ryegrass because we want quick stabilization. And then, of course, we have notes on some of these things. So running through, that's the plan, the restoration plan. We might want to go back to the top there, Bruce. And I'd be more than happy to answer any questions, see if you are desirous of any additional detail. Again, this was something that I put together this afternoon, but I think it covers the bulk of what would need to be done out there, with the focus being stabilizing that area, restoring. Then, of course, one thing we didn't talk about was that behind this, and there has to also be stabilization of the upland grassy area that Mr. Rodriguez is envisioning for his backyard.
Thanks, George.
You're welcome.
Mark, I'll start with you. Any comments, questions?
No, I have no questions. I'm glad to see a plan has been developed. And so when spring comes, this could be something that be implemented as soon as the growing season starts. That's all.
Okay, thanks. Neil?
Just curious on this chart where the property line for between 9 and 11 apple tree are, and in particular, is that privacy screen, if you will, all on 9 apple tree, or is that some of that actually on 11?
Yeah, so say 2/3 of it is on 11 and 1/3 or so is on 9. And that, of course, is something that is contingent on there being a land swap between the neighbors, which is something that someone with a legal expertise would have to accommodate.
So if that land swap does not go through, does that privacy screen shift? And does that then make
Yes.
area B, and what does that do to area B?
Right. So what would happen if the swap didn't happen, then the privacy privacy screening will come down to a 9, exactly, right there. And then area B will be expanded. And so we would have to accommodate and probably increase the plantings there by, say, a quarter or a third. Similar plantings to the ones we've been proposed. So that then it will be completely restored to Patricia's land if that was kept under her control, which is, I believe, what she wants. Whether whether the swap happens or not, my understanding is she wants to see the vegetation back there like she had seen it before. So,
Thank you.
That it, Neil?
Yeah, that's all at this point.
Okay. Thank you. Dave?
I was wondering if once all this thing is done, would it be good to have some sort of a conservation easement established so that it's very clear that these kind of things shouldn't be happening?
Well, that's a recommendation that certainly we can take into account. I don't see a problem. We would have to, again, if the legal thing happens and the swap happens, absolutely, yes, then we could talk about that.
Excuse me, the lawyer was retained today already.
Okay, yeah, I made a recommendation to Mr. Rodriguez on a lawyer that we've used in a similar situation in Torrington, where there had to be some swapping of lands. And so I'm glad to hear that happened.
Okay, just something to keep in mind as we proceed here. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks. Rich?
I appreciate the description of what's going on in area A and area B and area C. I'm kind of questioning the area that would be south of the arborvitaes. Yeah, that area. How would that area be restored?
That will be turf.
Okay. But it'll be stabilized.
Yes, absolutely. And some effort has taken place. I should have taken a picture. A good portion of the backyard is covered by straw at this point.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks, Rich. I've got a couple of questions. What kind of time frame are you talking about from start to finish on this?
Well, the start will be contingent on when our growing season starts. Usually in this area by April 15th, you're looking good in most years. This year, probably more so than others. And it depends on, and that's something that I'm going to have to discuss with Mr. Rodriguez. I mean, ideally, this should happen within a week. All the activities, okay, so that we can be in and out quickly. By the way, one of the things that I forgot to mention that's in that sequence is that we would maintain at a minimum of 6 hay bale check dams to slow water down and give some added protection while this swale is getting stabilized. And yes, a week would be what I would envision. Now, if it goes to 2 weeks, I think that's a little too much in my view, because of the fact that we have a waterway. Basically, it's a leak off from a significant amount of watershed.
Okay, yeah, and you answered one of my questions because I had a comment done about using check dams, and you just mentioned you talk about like 5 or 6 hay bale check dams, so that's good. And just one other comment is, I would probably prefer to see the 4-to-1 slope over a 3-to-1 slope. Just
sure,
general nature. So that's kind of where I'd be coming from on this. But I'm not in a position where I'm ready to make any comments, approvals, or whatever on this thing. Is how it just came in. I'd like to have a little bit of time to digest the information.
Certainly.
But it does look as though we're making some good progress now. So that is appreciated. I will say that.
Thank you.
So Bruce,
Yes, sir.
where are we, on, I mean, hopefully people can take a closer look at the details that were provided. This will be back on the agenda for the meeting on the 15th. There may be some additional questions or comments at that point in time. But ultimately, our bottom line is there's some type of a restoration plan that we would need to approve. Correct? I mean, that's sort of the bottom line.
Yes. Yes, there is.
Okay.
So the next meeting's on the 15th. I had picked this date, giving the commission at least a couple of meetings to go through it and give some back and forth on it. With George saying April 15th, then we've got a good month to really go through this. And, we at least have 2 more meetings that we can go through this. I guess the meantime, it's important that the owner has a contractor in line and ready to go. I mean, we can't wait until we're done April 1, let's say, and then hire and then find out these guys are not available or he can't get the material.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that he starts working with somebody now so they're ready to hit the ground.
I am working with somebody.
Okay, thank you.
One thing that I should mention, so that because obviously from a stabilization perspective, we need to hit it at the first opportunity that we have good weather from then on. And so April 15th would be the time for the swale and the seeding and the grading and all that. But it's quite possible that some of the actual planting will take place later, not the seeding, because one of the things that we're going to have to discuss with the nurseries of when they're able to start providing some of this plant material. And typically what happens in my experience is that they don't mobilize and get you what you want until sometime in May. And then usually they don't like to give you plugs until probably late May. But that doesn't mean we can't have full civilization and have as much of the vegetation in as possible. And then if we have to stagger some of the woody species or some of the plugs, we could do that, say, a month or so later.
Is that something you can provide a little more detail on?
Yeah, what I'll do is I'll call up New England Wetland Plantsic and talk to Mr. Anderson there that I have a relationship with and see what he's thinking about this year and see if what he tells me is something that sounds reasonable to me.
Okay, no, that's appreciated.
Yep.
Okay, so I mean, from my perspective, I mean, I'm encouraged that we have something, in writing now where we can take a look at it and go forward from there. And I guess a good part of the area has been stabilized with hay, correct, Bruce?
Yes, yes, it has been.
Okay.
And like I said, and I've just seen this about an hour ago. I opened this up and I started going through it. So I have a slew of questions for George as well.
Yep.
That I'd like to go over.
No, I mean, I think it was important to at least see what's going on or what's being proposed for the site. So I think that may give everybody a little better feeling for what's going on. Okay. So we'll include this on the March 15th agenda and we'll start following up and see where the road takes us.
Yeah, I'd like to make contact with George, go over my questions, concerns, and then hopefully we could regroup on the 15th and kind of hit everything at once.
Yep, so. Certainly. And one of the things that I didn't do, but I will do, is give you some specifications on the erosion control matting or jute matting.
Okay. All right. So I think that probably takes care of this for the evening. And we'll be back on the agenda on the 15th and we'll have a better understanding, having some time to go back and take a closer look at the plans. But thank you for that.
Welcome.
All right. Oh. Next item is on the planner's report. And you guys, at the last meeting, I discussed with you, Miss Orders was looking to put together or to put a fountain in the Swan Pond area. So we had to ask for some additional information from them. They have since provided us this information here. Their intent is to use this Medina fountain spray here. All right. As part of the system, it's pretty much a floating fountain on top with a drawdown tube. I think it's only goes 6 inches or a foot, it said. So that's the light. Sorry, hold on. So this is the LED kit. And then these are all the specifications here. So I know that was one of the big things is how are we going to address it? And let me see here. I think that's all we had. These are just the written specs. Yeah, that's all that was. So the main part of the question everyone had was just about the fountain itself. So it is a floating type fountain. It gets taken in and out at the beginning of the year, end of the year. It's a hardwired system that will run, that'll be on, that'll float on the pond, and then it goes. And they have plans on putting a system or a plug up on the hill a little bit. They're going to tie into an existing feed off of a EV station. So they're going to put that, and then this would be plugged in. So I guess the question before everyone was, I've never done one of these before with the commission, so just wondering how we wanted to approach this. Do we want to have them come in with a permit, or is this going to be a non-significant type of as of right situation?
Just a question for you, Bruce, just to clarify, this is on that water body that they came into us to do a bunch of work on, correct?
Yes.
This is the one, it's close to Garden Street?
Exactly. Come on. So you guys have the GIS on the screen right now, right?
Yes.
All right. So if I go over to Garden Street here, here's the new athletic turf fields heading north towards Main Street. Here's the aquatics, the pool area. Here's the tennis courts, and there's that new area they had built for that new road. This is the area right in here. It was pretty overgrown. You really didn't even know it was there for the most part. So as part of this was a significant increase for a water quality feature as part of this development. A lot of the stormwater, they had actually included infiltration in the parking lot with overflows in through here. So this picks up a lot of water. There's some existing drains, I think, up in here. It all feeds up through here. Let me turn on, see if I get the storm on here. And then from there, it outlets through the pond, down Garden Street, through the system, and right out to the river. So it was definitely a great upgrade to increase the water quality from the property. So as part of that, they had gone through and cleaned it out, regraded around the outside, did a full landscape plan. So it looks much better than it did before. And now they see it as a great focal point, and they want to add a fountain to it.
And the aeration of the water that should actually help the water quality in there too, shouldn't it?
It should keep it aerated.
And it's seasonal?
It's a seasonal. Out in the spring, back in pull it out and put it in the spring, and then bring it back in the fall.
So it's operational really just during the winter? Well,
no, during the spring and the summer. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sorry. I'm my in and out a little different.
Mark, any thoughts?
Well, I know how these things work. I think the only concern we previously spoke about is those fountains they usually spurts the water up, could be 10 feet in the air. You know, I mean, depending upon the size of the pump and everything else. So that would require, depending how big the flow is, you know, an extensive, you know, something a pump to suck the water through and push it out. I just don't know how much water is being used, and would that cause some type of suction, and if any aquatic life in there, how would they be affected? You know, I don't know. I know this thing has been, this pond has been revised, you know, I mean, been worked on and everything else, but we don't know if, you know, is there something now has come in and used it for its breeding? And, you know, this is a time of year, maybe somebody could go in and see if there are eggs stacks somewhere nearby in the pond to determine whether it's being utilized by amphibians and as such. So I'm a little apprehensive because I know how these things work. They sit in the middle of the pond. I assume the egg sacs and all that, if there are some, they would be toward the edge of the pond. But I'm still concerned that we're putting something in that could do some harm. And I know they're trying to make the water pure by keeping it circulated, but at the same time, are we defeating our cause here by disturbing something maybe has become a breeding ground or a vernal pool? So that's my only concern. I just don't know.
Yeah, they did, point. and not to interrupt you, but they did add they did give me a little additional information that requiring that it is the pattern is a 12-foot high spray with an 18-foot wide pattern, and it's paired with a 2 horsepower pump. So that's a pretty decent sized pump.
Yeah, if it goes up 12 feet, I assume the pump was going to be sufficient. So I don't know how far away does it, you know, I mean, how does it pull, you know, how much does it pull the general area around the fountain? Mm-hmm. I seen them work. I just never been underneath to see how they work. I see the top part, but I don't see the bottom part. So I'm very not knowledgeable about, should I be concerned or should I not be concerned? That's all.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Neil?
Yeah, I have similar questions. Given the size that Bruce just said too of the field, right, 18 feet. How big is that pond? I mean, I don't recall just from looking at it that pond is that large. So is that field going to, you know, really churn up the water and affect anything living in that, even along the edges?
That pond is
here.
If it's 40 feet across, I'd be lucky.
Yeah.
Maybe 50 tops.
I got a bunch of photos. I don't know if it's the one or it's the other one. It's this one here, probably. Here's some pictures that we had taken. So yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think like Mark, I'm just trying to get comfortable and probably have more questions and need more information about exactly how this is going to affect what's there.
Is that it, Neil?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Dave?
Yeah, I share the same concern, but I have nothing to add to what's already been said.
Okay, thank you. Rich?
I have similar concerns. I was wondering if the information we got on the fountain itself shows a screen on the water intake or anything to keep the critters out of the going through the fountain, and ended up having one heck of a ride.
Okay. Where'd I go with that? Let's see.
That's assuming they make it through the ride.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my only question.
I thought it said something about a screen somewhere. All right. So it sounds like this is something that we may be looking for a permit then, you think?
It could be, yeah, I mean, I've got the same questions that other people have. The other thing I'm wondering though is whether or not, and I think this is what people are kind of referring to, is going out there and actually taking a look to see if there's anything utilizing the pond, because that could then have an impact on them going forward with something like this. It may not be that you want to have something like this in the end of March, early April. You may be looking, you know, a little bit later in the year if it is in fact being utilized. So I think we're probably what, month and a half away from starting to see results in in vernal pools.
Yeah, well, the pond was, as you see in those photos, when it was hydroseeded, that was probably June of last year. So it really even hasn't even been a year, I think, yet since it's been since it's been completed and left alone.
And I think I would like to see if there's actually something that may have found its way over there and is utilizing it. And then that's something else we'd have to take into consideration. So I think that's going to be incumbent upon Ms. Porters to do some inspection of that area just to see whether or not they've got some non-rent paying critters out there.
Mr. Chairman, with the warm temperatures we had, except the brief snow we had the other day, would that be activity already maybe going on in that pond? Yeah. Like egg sacs?
I haven't seen anything on the cover of my swimming pool yet other than ice and snow, so I'm not sure.
Is that in
South? We had a lot of frogs on the pool cover, so it's.
I assume you're talking about Connecticut, now South Carolina.
I'm talking about Connecticut. I'm talking about Farmington in particular. So I think, I mean, because it sounds like that's one of the issues that most of the commission members, if not all of us, are looking at on this. So, I mean, I don't think it's going to hurt any to wait a little bit to, you know, find out whether or not this area is in fact being utilized by any type of species out there. I mean, I don't see fish in something like this. I mean, it just doesn't really make too much sense, but it's an area that maintains water pretty much all year long, if not all year long. And you don't know what kind of critters might be there. I mean, you're not that far away from the river, so.
Nope. It is, however, it is all lawn around it, so maybe that has some effect. But I agree. I mean, like I said, I'll just speak with Ms. Porters. I know they have an engineer, and I think, Lorero, and I think they have an environmentalist on staff as well. So maybe they can coordinate with them, you know, and they can do all the legwork with the pond or with the fountain company.
I mean, I think it would just be smarter to do it that way, and this way try to answer some of the questions that commission members have or some of the concerns they have about putting a pump in here. And then also, you know, getting a clarification on the screening and what kind of mesh that screening might be, assuming, I mean, I'm assuming it's going to have some kind of screening, but what are we looking at? And can they do any research on what that screening might do or might not do?
Okay.
Any type of egg masses that should find their way into this water body? Because my guess is eventually somebody's going to find it. So,
perfect. All right, sir. That's all I had for planners report.
Okay. Next up, approval of the minutes for February 15th, 2023 wetlands meeting. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved by Dave.
Second by Mark.
May I have a motion to approve the minutes of in wetlands meeting of February 15th, 2023. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstaining. Okay, I've got 8:20, so we'll adjourn now and we will open the Conservation Commission meeting at 8:20. And I believe we actually have some business on here tonight.
Give me 1 second. Get that loaded in out right here. We have a high school student. She's doing her CAP project. Hermione, are you there? Did she hang in? Oh, she hung in. Good. I told her about 7:45, 8 o'clock, so it wasn't that bad. But so, all right, Hermione, it's all yours. Go ahead. You can introduce yourself.
Yep. So, hi, my name is Hermione Kumar, and today I'm just going to be sharing with you all my project, Flowing Forward, Evaluating Farmington's Fish Populations for Informed Land and Water Use. The picture on the slide just shows my community partner, Mike, holding two different species of fish we found in Unionville Brook. The top one is a pumpkin seed, and the bottom is a bluegill.
Just
you can go to the next slide.
Yep. Just give me the next slide. No, I'll change it for you.
Okay, so, like I said earlier, my name is Hermione Kumar, and I'm a 10th grade student at FHS. And I conducted this research as a part of the Conservation Ambassador Program CAP under the Natural Resources Conservation Academy, NRC at UConn. So Mike Buchain, supervising fisheries biologist at CTD, served as my community partner throughout this process by providing guidance and support for my project. Also, my CAP mentors, Alana and Leah, also provided support for my project. So this is the background section where I'll just be sharing some of the reasons why I chose to do this specific project. Okay. So during the week at UConn NRCA, we had a fisheries day where I really enjoyed learning about the biodiversity and the conservation of these aquatic species. So when it came time for my project, I wanted to do something related to fisheries. So after doing some research about fisheries, a problem I noticed in my community was that there was a need for updated data on the fish populations in Farmington streams and rivers, since most of the data previously collected was from the 2010s. After speaking to some people in my community, I also noticed that they didn't really have a good understanding of the impact that we all have on our waterways in Farmington. So after seeing that, I knew I had to help out in some way to inform my community and to help keep the fish population data updated, because having updated data and well-informed citizens is very necessary to make well-informed decisions about our land and water uses that help our environment and our town. The research I did to help with this was first going out and sampling the streams to get an updated fish population count, which you can see us doing in the photo. And the second thing was to analyze and assess the health of those streams and rivers that I sampled. So in this section, I'll just be sharing some of the steps I took to make this research possible. So the first step in my process was to determine which streams in Farmington that I should sample. So in order to do this, I did background research on what existing data Farmington already had and which data need to be updated the most. And I did research on local waterways that could be sampled easily. My main form of research was looking at maps to see where research could be done and where it would be needed. For example, the bottom map shows cold water habitats in Farmington, and the red dots are all cold water habitats, and the blue parts are their corresponding drainage basins. This map in particular was helpful in determining which streams and rivers had cold water species, and if that would be helpful for my research. After doing the background research, I decided on sampling Roaring Brook, Unionville Brook, and Scottswamp Brook. The second step was to do the actual sampling, and for this, the method that we used was electrofishing. So electrofishing is just a fishing technique that uses direct electric current, which affects the movements of the nearby fish, which stuns them temporarily so that they can be caught. This method of fishing is not harmful to the fish, as it only stuns them for 8 to 10 seconds, and it is highly effective to properly assess the populations of fish. And the last step was to synthesize all the data I collected to be able to find the implications and the importance of my data. So in this section, I'll just be sharing all the data I collected from each of the streams that I sampled. So this is just a background slide on some of the factors that I assessed on my data. The first category is origin, and the two types are native species and non-native species. Native species are species that are indigenous to Farmington, and their presence is the result of only local natural evolution during history. Non-native species are species that were added into the environment and introduced from other places. The second category is habitat, and this includes the stream flow and the tolerance level. Stream flow measures how fast the water is moving. For example, fluvial specialist species live in fast-flowing water, while macrohabitat generalists can live in slower-moving water or still water. Tolerance level measures the ability of a species to survive and reproduce in environmental stress. The tolerant species, for example, can survive under environmental stress, while intermediate species can survive under some environmental stress. The last category is species richness, which is a measure of the number of different species collected from a certain brook. Species richness helps us determine the diversity of the fish population in a stream. So this is the data I collected for Roaring Brook in comparison to the previous town data for Roaring Brook from 2015. As you can see in the top left graph, in 2015, 81 total fish were collected from 7 different species, while in 2022, which is the data I collected, 43 total fish were collected from 6 different species. While the top left graph is helpful in showing the exact number of fish collected from the different species, the graph on the right is more helpful in comparing the two sampling dates. The graph is showing what percentage of the total was that species. For example, we can see that in 2015, around 20% of the total fish collected were fall fish, which can be seen in the first column, while around 67% of the total fish that I collected in 2022 were fall fish. This data tells us that in Roaring Brook, from 2015 to 2022, the percentage of fall fish in the brook increased by around 47%, which is helpful in drawing conclusions, which we can do for other species by looking at the graph. So this is the data I collected for Unionville Brook in comparison to the previous town data for Unionville Brook from 2012. As you can see in the top left graph, in 2012, 200 total fish were collected from 10 different species, while in 2022, which is the data I collected, 40 total fish were collected from 9 different species. The top left graphic again is helpful in showing the exact number of fish collected from the different species, while the graph on the right is more helpful in comparing the two sampling dates. The graph on the right shows up, for example, that in 2012, around 57% of the total fish collected were fall fish, while around 70% of the total fish that I collected were fall fish. This data can tell us that in Unionville Brook, after 10 years, the percentage of fall fish in the brook has increased by about 13%, which is helpful in drawing conclusions. One of the conclusions that we can draw here, for example, is for the fall fish, is that their percentage has remained roughly the same, indicating that their population is not increasing or declining. So for Soft Warm Brook, there was no previous data collected that I found on their website. So my data solely consists of the data that I collected on the day I went out. Also, when we collected the data, it was actually the day after a heavy rainstorm. So the fish actually went into deeper waters, which we weren't able to electrofish at because it was deeper, and then there's like a depth restraint. So these are the reasons why there were only 9 fish collected from 4 different species, which includes 1 amphibian. And looking at the graph, we can also see that the black-nosed dace were the most collected species at around 67% of the fish were black-nosed dace. So like in the photo at like the top right-hand corner is just a photo of the salamander that we collected. It was a 2-line salamander and it was an adolescent. So here are some graphs comparing the data I collected between the 3 different brooks that I sampled. So the graph on the left shows the population density between some species that were in common between the brooks. The population density is just the number of fish per meter, and in order to calculate this, we measured the length in meters of the part of the river that we sampled, and then divided that number by the number of fish found in the length of the sampling site. For example, the species in common between all 3 brooks was the black-nosed dace. And we can see that, that the number of black-nosed dace per meter in all 3 brooks was less than 0.2. So there's also other species in the graph that were common between just 2 brooks that can also be seen. The graph on the right shows the number of species collected based on their tolerance levels. As I mentioned earlier, tolerance levels are just how tolerant the species is to environmental stress. So in this graph, we can see that, for example, the majority of species in Unionville Brook and Roaring Brook are intermittently tolerant to environmental stress, which is in the middle of the scale at intermediate. So these are just some more graphs comparing the data between the different brooks I sampled. The graph on the left is comparing the origins of the species. So we can see that between all the brooks, there are majority native species, which is a very good thing. However, we can also see that Unionville Brook does have some non-native species as well. The graph on the right is comparing the stream flow. As mentioned earlier, fish are super sensitive to the flow of a stream. So stream flow is a very good indicator for the overall health of a fish population. Seeing as how the majority of the fish in all 3 brooks are fluvial specialists, meaning they need fast-flowing water, this is a good indication that all these 3 streams have fast-flowing water, which is proved by the species of fish found. So this is a slide just summarizing the key takeaways from the data I presented earlier. So in terms of native species, we saw that between all the brooks, there was a majority native species, which shows that Farmington's native species are thriving and not being overtaken by the non-native species. For the stream flow, as mentioned earlier, the majority of the fish in all 3 brooks are fluvial specialists, meaning they need fast-flowing water, and this is a good indication that these 3 streams have fast-flowing water. When comparing the past data to the data that I collected, we noticed only slight differences in the percentages of the fish species, which indicates that our systems are stable as the populations are not increasing or decreasing. However, when we look at the data for Unionville Brook, we saw the presence of non-native species and that there are more macro habitat generalists than fluvial dependent species, which means that there are parts of the stream that do have still or slow moving water. For tolerance levels, we saw that there were mostly intermediate level species, and in Scott Swamp Brook, we saw the highest population density of black-nosed dace. So these are just the implications of the data I presented earlier and kind of summarizing like what it means. So in terms of next steps, this information is really necessary in order to make informed decisions regarding land and water use, particularly as it relates to the impact on and of the stream. With accurate fish population counts and an assessment of the overall health of the waterways, the town can make wise decisions that will support the conservation and protection of these important natural resources. So all of this is important because healthy waterways and fish populations are indicators of a healthy environment. And a healthy environment is important for both human and wildlife populations as it provides essential ecosystem services such as clean water, air, and soil. Conserving these resources will ensure that future generations can continue to benefit from them. Additionally, conserving these resources can also help with flood control, erosion prevention, and maintaining water quality, which can reduce the cost for the town in the long run. So in this section, I'm just going to be summarizing everything I've been presenting and the implications I stated earlier. So we need to continue taking care of our waterways for several reasons. Firstly, healthy waterways and fish populations are crucial for maintaining a healthy ecosystem as they provide food and habitats for other wildlife. And they also help to regulate water quality and flow. Secondly, maintaining healthy waterways can help to reduce the risk of flooding and erosion, as well as improving the overall aesthetics of the area. Finally, it is our responsibility as stewards of the environment to protect and to preserve these natural resources for our future generations to enjoy. Some of the action steps to continue taking care of these waterways are first, implementing and enforcing regulations that limit the amount of pollution and development that could occur near our waterways. This can include limiting runoff from construction sites, monitoring industrial and agricultural activity near water bodies, and by promoting the use of non-toxic pesticides and fertilizers. Secondly, promoting the use of green infrastructure practices such as rain gardens and vegetated swell to help capture and filter stormwater runoff. These can help reduce the amount of pollutants and sediments that enter the water bodies, improving the overall water quality and the habitat conditions for fish and other aquatic species. Third, the town can invest in ongoing monitoring and assessment of these water bodies to track changes in the fish populations, water qualities, and habitat conditions. I personally would recommend resampling Scott Swamp Brook because the data we collected was after heavy rainfall. So by resampling the site, we can get a better understanding about the current conditions. This will overall continuing sampling will help us identify any issues or concerns early on, allowing for more effective management and conservation efforts. Finally, by educating the community about the importance of these water bodies and their associated ecosystems, as well as the impacts of individual actions on water quality and habitat conditions, this can encourage residents to adopt practices that protect and conserve these important resources that we have in Farmington.
All done?
Yeah, that's all I had.
Great job.
That's very good. Just out of curiosity, do any of the commission members have any questions? Mark?
I just want to verify, you said only Scott Swamp, that was the only one that was affected by heavy water, right?
Yeah, because the day that we sampled Scott Swamp Brook was after a heavy rainstorm.
So I saw the number of fish you caught were fewer than the previous years. Is that you were saying everything looks healthy? I just saw numbers were less. I didn't know if that meant you say everything is fine, but I just saw numbers like one was 200 fish and then your data had 40 fish. And is it just because of how many people were collecting the samples and that made a difference?
Yeah, so usually when the town samples like rivers or stream, for example, they would do like a really thorough job because they have like hired professionals doing that.
Yep.
And since it was just like me and my community partner Mike, who's from CTD, we weren't able to get like as controlled as an environment, but we were still able to get like a large enough sample from Unionville Brook and Roaring Brook in order to make like these conclusions.
I noticed that the species richness, the diversity was the same in all the streams. I just thought, that was the same, nothing really changed. It was just the number of fish. So that's good to know that the diversity is the same. And as you said, it's all about who's out there collecting the sample. They probably had 10 times more people than what you had.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's it.
Thanks, Mark. Neil?
And I'm just curious about how you chose the sites within these brooks to sample, to do your electrofishing, and how big of an area did you select in each of the brooks?
Yeah, so generally speaking, like my community partner Mike had a better idea about like what factors to be looking for. So he told me like some suggestions about like places to sample, and I did further research about like which ones data would need to be updated the most and which ones would have like the most diverse fish. Also, like in terms of like the sampling distance, most of them were around 50 meters. So for the population density, we would just divide like around 50-ish meters of sampling site by the number of fish we found.
Okay, and were you looking for areas where the brooks were moving quickly or stable, or and did you try to do the same in each of the different brooks?
Yeah, so we just tried to do like a variety of streams around Farmington, but like the main factor was because in electrofishing, the electricity source is on like a backpack, so you're kind of limited to about knee depth. So because of that, we were only able to like most of the like deep rivers, such as like the Farmington River, were eliminated because of like the amount of depth or like the width of the river. So we were limited to like brooks, for example.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Neil. Dave?
I didn't have any questions, but I'd like to thank you for a very good presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, Rich?
Yeah, I would mirror Dave's comment. Thank you very much for taking the time and the interest to do this. It's really appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, I would also like to express my congratulations on this too. But one question I do have is, what were the dates of collection?
So we had to go before like the winter season to avoid like the fish being dormant or to avoid like the river being too cold. So we run around beginning of November.
Okay, no, thank you. Yeah, because I'm used to dealing with fish, not anymore, but once upon a time dealing with fish on the Housatonic River. So I kind of know what you're talking about with different times of the year. So, okay, thank you. But no, this is very informative and much appreciated.
Thank you.
So I think that's it, Bruce, unless we had something
That
else
is
on it.
it. Yeah, that's it. I don't have anything under the planner's report. So just approval of the minutes.
Well, no, the other thing we do need to just mention again under planner's report is the Household Hazardous Waste Collection Day is March 25th, right?
Yes,
Yes.
that sounds about right.
Yep, it is. Okay. So that's it. And then can I get a motion to approve? Wait a minute.
Oh, that's not right. 118? No, that was
Yeah,
2.
no, because I just looking at that. And
215. Yeah.
So it's the minutes of February 15th, 2020.
Yeah, 215-23. Sorry.
Conservation Commission meeting. So if somebody would care to make a motion?
Do I have the right one? Yeah, I got the right one. All right.
All right, for the correct date of what, February 15th, Mark,
Yep.
so moved for the February 15th.
Okay, is there a second?
Dave will second.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, abstaining. That about does it for tonight. It's 8:42.